Good afternoon. I've really looked forward to coming today because, as my husband keeps saying, what's it all about? And I thought to myself, what's it all about? It's all about education, it's all about perceptions, it's all about raising awareness and the happy place. All of the things that I've heard so far from our speakers have all happened to me and all part of my life. But also, on the invitation, that was a text the other day, it said, Valerie Moody, one of the speakers, to learn all about, the fairground. Well, if that's what you're going to think you're going to hear today, you're out of luck. Because I'm not going to talk about the fairground as such. I'm speaking about my life as a showwoman on the fairground, travelling with my parents, going into schools, many schools, about my life, and a little bit about where we've come to today with education. As a little girl, on the fairground, I travelled with my mum and dad, my brother Freddie, in our showman's caravan. And just to clear up, in case anybody thinks she's from the fair, so when she's finished, we might get our fortunes told. The stereotype, you're out of luck, because I come from, as I said, the fairground community, which is a cultural minority. It's a business group, and if anybody's been to the town moor, right? Well, I'm generally there at the town moor with our children's rides and my family. So going back quite a few years as a little girl, travelling and going to school. Could you imagine what it was like every 2 weeks, from Easter to November, to go into a different school? How you felt walking through the front door and your stomach churning and knowing yet again, when you sat down, the first thing the teacher's going to say anyway is, we have a new pupil, she's here for 2 weeks, and she's from the fairground. Because those words, the fairground, we were exotic creatures. Listen, I'm a woman of a certain age. I've been 21 3 times, and a bit, right? 72, like this year. So it's a long time ago when I went to school, but I do remember that always the child next to me was waiting to ask these questions. Where do you live? You're from the fairground. You live in a caravan. Ooh. Long time ago, and they wanted to know, where do you sleep? They didn't know, did they? I realise now it's lack of information, lack of awareness. Way back then, I just thought they were being intrusive. So I would tell them, well, in the bottom bunk bed. Because our showman's caravan on 4 wheels, beautiful, and it was huge. When you're a child, things look huge, don't they? 24 feet in old money. 24 feet. Bedroom, double bedroom, living room, kitchen, and then bunk beds, top and bottom bunk beds. And Brother Freddie had the top and I had the bottom one. But I had to ask my father, I said to him, what shall I tell these kids at school? They keep asking about where do I sleep? And he said, tell them you hang up in a wardrobe. This is all, honestly, this is the truth. Tell them you hang up in a wardrobe. I'm asking for information. I'm asking for my father to give me guidance and advice, not realizing what he's doing is telling me sarcasm, because it's what he's had all of his life as well, going to school. All of those things that you don't think about. And hang up in a wardrobe. And the other thing, then we're going to go further on. The other thing would be, where do you go to the toilet? Don't forget, it's a long time ago. If anybody's been caravanning way back then, you would know what I'm talking about. We had our own portaloo outside, right? But how did I know as a 7-year-old? That's how I'm going to describe it. But I just said, well, we had our own toilet. And then again, I asked my father, what do I tell them? What do I tell these kids who keep asking me, Dad? And he said, tell them you've got a hole in the floor. A hole in the floor to go to the toilet? I mean, my God. And I realise now there are people out there my age who went to the same schools that I did. They would say, fairground, I knew a girl. She hung up in a wardrobe, and then they had a hole in the floor for the toilet. Well, of course, we didn't, and we don't. And I've got a beautiful home now. I still live in a caravan. I'm still from the fairground. We still travel. We go to the town moor. But I'm very much involved in education. My education, going to different school every 2 weeks, I've got to tell you, I hated it. And in my happy place, not only was it my home, it was inside my head, and it was wanting to learn. I had a thirst for knowledge. I wanted to learn, especially long words. I loved it. And if I hadn't got these books at school, then I'd find the local library, even as a little girl, and I'd go in. You couldn't borrow the books from the library because I'm from the fair. I might have stolen them. So I used to read a book inside the library, and I also used to have a dictionary. I'd get the dictionary down because I wanted to know. I wanted to better myself in my head, inside of me, a better education to go further in the world. I used to think it can't always be about making toffee apples as I grow up and being on the fair. There must be something else I could do if I had the knowledge, education. And just going to school, just going to these libraries. And I do remember, very briefly, I do remember reading something about, and I'm sure you all know what I'm going to say, or you'll know what meaning, elongated proboscis. You all know that word, of course. You use it every day. It just means a fly with a long nose, a long snout. But I read it because in the story that I was reading, there was a fly and it had a elongated proboscis. And I thought, yes, that sounds good. So I read it up. And then going home and being able to share with my parents my knowledge and saying, oh, there's a fly just flown by, Dad. Did you see it? It had an elongated proboscis. Father was not amused at all and then said to my mother, did you hear what she's just said? You know, is this the kind of words coming out of her mouth? Because he didn't understand it either. So, going on, I'm about 12, I'm reading, I was a good reader at 6, and I'm reading, I'm now 12, still going into libraries, reading books, and I'd got Georgette Hare, or Higher, depends how you pronounce it, George, and it was in the, I think either the Edwardian or Georgian, when they had the fan, and it meant a lot. But also, the words in there, I love them, Mama and Papa. And I thought, that sounds good. By now, our family had increased to 5 children. And we had a ghost train ride, that was the family business, no different to having a farm or a corner shop. We grew up and that was our business. But also as we grew up in our life on the fairground, we knew what we were going to do in the future. We were going to work with our parents and our families. We were going to carry on and hopefully, as we grew, get married into another fairground family and continue the tradition. And my father kept us enclosed. Not that we couldn't go out, but he made sure that we only had friends within the community. A long time ago, I realized that was making us safe and keeping us within our community, because our community is a cultural community, not an ethnic one. And you all know each other. But going back to the library and reading, and I thought, oh, this is nice. Mama and Papa. You couldn't get any better than that. So when I go to get my father to tell him it's his dinner, because we weren't posh then, it was breakfast, dinner and tea. It's different now, isn't it? So I go and tell him, and he stood with all these men talking. This is at Rotherham Fairground, and I walk up there like a baby elephant and say to my father, waiting of course for the pause in conversation, excuse me, Papa, would you join us at the luncheon table? And he looked at me, looked round at these men who were all looking at him and looking at me, and said, go home. And I couldn't shut up because and he went, now. So I did. And when I got indoors, up came my father like a reindeer animal, up the steps, flung the door open, said to my mother, you want to hear what she's just said to me out there? Because obviously he was embarrassed. I still, blonde-eyed, couldn't shut up. I then said to him, or else to my mother, Mama, my father is so uncouth, he hasn't washed his hands for lunch, or for dinner. And my dad jumped across this table to get hold of me, and my mother just went, sit down, Fred, have your dinner, you sit down, be quiet, and have your dinner. But something inside of me wanted to go further. As I grew up, got married, in and out of schools, going to a job, working, I didn't tell people I was from the fairground, because there's a stereotype and the stigma. They assumed who you were before you even got through the door, so I didn't tell them. And kind of waited till I was well in a job, and before I explained, oh, I'm from the fairground. You're from the fairground? You're a gypsy? I'm sure they must have thought I should have had something like a headscarf on and a frilly apron and gold all over the place and whatever, and talked about hedgehog stew. But I didn't, because I'm from the fairground. 18, I met my husband-to-be at Newcastle Town Moor. Love the place. I love Newcastle. You cannot know, going to Newcastle Town Moor Fair, For me, and for everybody that I know, it's a thrill. We go for business because that's our business. We take our rides and our stalls there. But also, it's the recreational time. You see your friends, and we have a school on the town moor. Now, I mentioned the word school and education because it's so important to me. And as a child, I would never have known how it was going to change my life, take me all over Europe, meeting people and helping to change the show children's education at the same time. I got married at Ripon Cathedral, had 2 children. We travelled around the northeast with our fabulous modern caravan, which by that, it was 30 foot long at the time, way back then. 30 foot. I now have a 40 foot long caravan. Very modern. We don't have a hole in the floor. We've got a beautiful bathroom, marble floor. We've got everything that you could have in your home, except it's in a smaller space. If I carry on like this, by the time I'm 90, it'll be about 60 foot long and whatever. It does weigh 10 ton, and my husband said, it's your clothes that keep all this weight in here, it's 10 ton long. Right. 31 years ago, my 2 children, they've gone to school, they've done quite well. My son went to the high tech for 2 years. He's got an IQ of 160. Fabulous. But it doesn't mean he knows all the practical things. He's good at what he knows. Ask him to make a cup of tea when he was at home. We live in a caravan, for God's sake. Where do you keep the cups? In a caravan? It was hardly 20 rooms, is it? In the cupboard, darling. Where's the tea bags? In the tea caddy there. You'd think he would know. That's his home. However, they did very well, both my children, in education, and they've done well since when they've got married. 31 years ago. This is the important part of my life. The other things I've told you are little segments. Hopefully you've enjoyed that. 31 years ago, my husband came back from a Showman's Guild meeting and said, would you like a job? 2 teenage children and a husband, 2 children's rides, 2 refreshment stalls, and we're on the market in Middlesbrough. I didn't realise I had 5 minutes for another job. Indeed, what job would this be? Well, because people in our community looked upon us as a family who were interested and cared about education, the Showman's Guild had thought, oh, Valerie might want to do this, because they'd had a letter from the Department for Education to ask if they would appoint someone in the Showman's Guild, if they would appoint someone in every region to liaise with schools. And who came to the northeast? It was me. Would you like that job, Valerie? And the first thing this gentleman said to me is, there's no money in it. I've been a missionary all my life. Does it matter? Money's not the driving force of your life. There's no money in it. There's no guidelines, no rules. But you may get a trip abroad. And I thought, well, never mind abroad. I'm not really bothered about the money. I just wanted to change education for show children. People like my children, who we'd taken backwards and forwards to school. They'd done their exams. They'd gone on to higher learning. But lots of the children didn't, because their parents were just like my parents when I was little. You went to every school at every place, and then returned in the winter to the base school, really not knowing a lot more than you knew when you set out, because the teachers at the time, can't blame them, there wasn't national curriculum, as there is now. They would give you a piece of paper, a pen or a pencil, sit in the back, or read. I was a speed reader. My God, I went through some of the schools, every book they'd got. I was in my happy place, by the way, my happy place. 31 years ago, and I thought, what can I do to change? What can I do to change education for our children, for the rest of my community? And one of the things was, I was contacted by a lady in Middlesbrough. Would you come to a meeting, education meeting? Right, and I thought, how long will it be before she twigs? I don't know anything. I'm a housewife, mother, partner in the business. We show people, we travel from Easter to November. What do I know about education, other than my own children and mine? So I went along to meet her, and then she said, would you speak at the conference? Well, yes, if you like. And I thought, oh my goodness, speaking at a conference. I'd never done any public speaking, so I bought a book. Can't remember what it's called, but you can read this book, and it gives you confidence and tells you how to speak in public. And I'm sure some of you here have read these books. And the one thing it did tell you was, don't have dangly earrings. Don't put your change, don't joggle your change in your pocket in case it distracts. But the best thing it told me was, look at the back, to somebody in the back of the audience there, and smile. And they'll smile back to you. And what it did, it gave you confidence. And I thought, yes, but I had to practice this. So I practiced on my husband. I would say, are we going to the shop today or what? Are you going to come in for your lunch or whatever? And he said to me one day, where's that book, Valerie? And I said, why? Do you want to read it? He went, I don't. I want to bin it. He said, I'm sick of the way you're talking to me. But nevertheless, it gave me that confidence. And I went to this meeting, this conference, and I looked at the back, and I started to speak, and whoever, whatever, gave me comfort. And this lady just smiled back at me. And it's also said in the book, speak as if you're only speaking to that lady. You know the rugby player? He's focused, I focus to her, and I'm telling her my story about education, my going in and out of schools, not being happy, doing better for my children, wanting to make a difference. And this, an hour and 20 minutes, it's not going to be that long, by the way, you can, somebody tell, but an hour and 20 minutes later, I came off the platform there, and this gentleman came up, never met him before, and he said to me, we haven't met, we'll meet in the future, we'll become good friends. He said, but I didn't know there was another travelling community. He said, show people. He said, and I've never been to a conference and had so much facts and information. And we will meet in the future. And a few weeks went by, and I got a package from the Department for Education. And I thought, oh my God, a package from I must be, I'm doing something right. And when I opened this, there was a little stick-it note to a government white paper. Didn't even know what it was then, but I do now. Turn to page so-and-so. And when I turned to this page, this gentleman had a little note said, this is because of you. This happened because of you. And what had happened was, he was HMI, Her Majesty's Inspectorate for schools, for gypsies, Roma, travellers, and then in brackets, show people. And he said, that's because of you. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is when I thought, yes, you can change the world. You've just got to know how to do it and tap into it. Part of changing my world and our world on the fairground for the children is making sure, because they all go to school just the same as everybody else, it's no different to any community. There are parents who want their children to learn, there are parents who don't really care. No different to society in general, but we're a travelling community. So what they have to do, when they grow up, they're going to learn their life skills. My daughter came into our hot dog stall. She wasn't near the pans, so I wasn't going to let her get hurt, but over the course of time, I taught her how to make candy floss. She was 7, and I've got a photograph of her at 7 making candy floss. And when my granddaughter came along, at the same age, 7, she came in with and she said, can I help you make candy floss? And I thought, oh, yes. Well, I've got a grandson that's 5. He's not come in yet because he'll cause havoc, but maybe I'll teach him how to make candy floss. But we were learning our life skills, going to school. And then something happened to me. I wanted to make a difference so much that our business became secondary. Not my family, not my husband and family, but my business became, my job, my work, my vocation in life, because that's what it became, a vocation in life. Remember the thing about no money, right? Well, my daughter once said to me, do you know how many toffee apples we've got to sell to pay for your ticket to go down to London? Because I was going to the DFE, the Department for Education, Great Smith Street, on a regular basis. But my husband and my family supported me. They thought, well, she's got to, we've got to fund that, so they did. And I'm very grateful for that. But going, meeting ministers and being able, and having not only the experience, but having the bravado to say, excuse me, minister, whose children are you talking about? Because this minister, and I shan't say his name, it would embarrass him. And he's been embarrassed enough in the press, so I shan't tell you his name. But when he said, your children, Mrs. Moody, are the least attainment group. And I said, could you tell me who my children are? He said, oh, yes. Gypsy Roma traveller. And I said, I beg your pardon, minister. What are they going to do? Kick me out of my job? They don't pay me. It's voluntary. So I said to him, I beg your pardon, minister. Who are my children? I said, I'm sorry. I'm from the fairground community. We're show people. And in fact, if you had checked your facts, you would find that in certainly the last 15 years, education for show children has been turned on its head. Where, like me, as a little girl, it used to be going to a school every place you went to. Now, it's the parents who are commuting, not the children. Because those parents 30 years ago who had the same experience as me, and they had their own children, and they saw the value of education, and that the travel education teacher would come out to support them. There wasn't, way back then, there wasn't the FaceTiming, Skyping or the computers. There is now. So now, my granddaughter, when she was doing her project for university, Newcastle University, so what are you doing, darling? This is in my caravan at Newcastle Town Moor. She went, no, she said, I'm just sending my homework back, she said, to the uni. Okay, right, oh, lovely. And I thought, crikey, We didn't have that. It was enough to have a paper and pencil when I was a kid. A lot of my work is going into schools, speaking, raising awareness about us as show people and our community. A lot of my work is not only speaking to children, but to the teachers who don't seem to know. I spend a lot of my time giving talks to ladies' groups and whatever, all over the country. Because if a minister can say to me, who are your children? Who are your children? For 31 years, I've gone backwards and forwards to London, to Great Smith Street. And not long ago, I had a meeting with the Under-Secretary of State. Sounds grand, doesn't it? Just the same as everybody else. She's just got a job. Under-Secretary of State. And she said, you know, Valerie, the more we speak to show people, the more we understand them. And I thought, Minister, I didn't say it to her, but in my head I'm thinking, I'm 72. How many more times have I got to keep coming down here, talking to ministers, sending you little booklets, speaking to you? But it has changed, because our children now, it's the parents who are going backwards and forwards to the fair during the school week. They're stopping at home with grandparents, or parents are going to the fair, as they will do in a few, next week at Yarm Fair. Their children will be in school through the day. Come tea time, the kids will either go with them or they'll be looked after by grandparents or family, and the parents will go to the school to the fair while these children are doing their homework, hopefully. But they're still learning their life skills. My family goes back to 1796. They were sweet makers, confectioners. And as one wag said at Yarm School last year to me when I was speaking to the class, Mrs. Moody, what was it like in 1796? Was you there? And I thought, you little turnip. But nevertheless, and listen, boots protect and perfect is good. It ain't that good, right? But nevertheless, it's my family who we're speaking about. And just to tell you that, I thought these kids in this class are not responding how they normally respond when I give a talk. They generally ask questions and they seemed a little bit out of sorts. So I said to the teacher briefly, what class am I replacing? And she went, oh, drugs and sex. And I thought, drugs and sex? I thought, well, Yarm Fair's next week. So by the time they've been to the fair, there'll have been a bit of rock and roll. So they'll have had drugs, sex and rock and roll all in 1 week. But they were good and they did ask questions. But that's most of my job, is liaising with schools. I'm also the listening ear. Do you know how long it takes to be a listening ear to a community? Fairground community is 20,000 strong. I don't know all of them, but they know me. Because if they need help or someone who will help them or advise them, I'm not that person, but I know somebody who will. So very often they'll just ring me and say, it can be I'm Auntie Valerie to 20,000 people, it seems. Auntie Valerie, or Valerie, will you help me? We've got this planning matter. Could we have one of your little booklets? Or will you speak to so-and-so? Autism, I've been in a school, didn't even know these children were autistic. Would you just go in this class and speak? Yes. So I did do, and I told them a very humorous story about me as a little girl. And I thought, this is strange. There's 5 teachers in this class, and all these children are sat in a circle. And because it's the way I do work anyway, and I'm very tactile, I'm walking around and I'm talking to everyone, every child. And I just touched one, or I said, oh, your hair's lovely, and this is nice. And at the end of this class, I looked, and these teachers are crying, and I thought, what have I done? Why are all these teachers, they're all in tears? And when these children, when I went out of the class, or rather they went out first, I said, have I done something wrong? They went, you don't know, but these children, they're all autistic. And I went, oh, it wouldn't have made any difference, I'd ever known anyway, but I had to work that little bit harder than I normally would. And she said, you know what you've done? She said, you've talked to all of these children, they've spoke to you, because now they're talking to me about my little children's books, and they're asking me things about them. And then, when they went out, and the teachers are telling me, they went, you've lit a fire. Some of these children won't even survive in this today's world the way they are, but some of them will. Well, about 3 months later, I got this package of, I'm drawing to a close, so we're not going to be here till tea time. About 3 months later, I got a package, and it was from all of the children in that classroom. And they'd wrote the loveliest notes. They'd done paintings. We loved it when you talked about your caravan, about the book. Can you come back and see us? And I was invited to go back to that school. And when I went in, the teacher said to me, don't look, she said, at the board. Please don't look before you go in. Don't look. So I didn't. And what had happened is all of these children, the project they had done was about about Valerie and Freddie on the fair. The 7 and 10-year-old, and the adventures they got up to. And they had all written their own books. And they wanted me to see their copy of their books, done in the same format, same colours, same kind of stories. But each one had a little story. It might have been bullying. It might have been a feeling a little bit out of it, or happy in their happy place. I can't tell you what it felt like. These weren't show children. These were children from the local community. They've now progressed, by the way, to making films. So they're doing very well. But what stayed with me was lighting a fire, lighting a spark of interest. And that's what hopefully I've done within our community, because more of our young people have gone on to full-time education. They've gone on to university, Durham, Oxford, could I just tell you, Cambridge. The world is their oyster. They can go where they like. The background is fairground. We have a niece who's a surgeon. She's a surgeon. And yet when her parents need her to help them on the fairground and she's not working, she goes back to help. She's not too high and mighty to do that. That's what she's going to do, because that's her background. We hope that we give our children, we make them think they've got a good, hopefully a better education than they had 20 or 30 years ago. We've got fairground manufacturers in our community. We've got lawyers. We've got barristers. I'm trying to think. We've got interior designers. We have the full spectrum, as they say. The fact is they come from the fairground is because, and has done so well, is because they're expected to work within our community. They've got responsibilities. And also what they share is, when I was little, and the fair did very well, and our ghost train did very well, I knew that I'd get my wages this week, or we could go to the pictures. If it didn't do well that week, and we didn't take anything, the bills still had to be paid, but I knew I wouldn't be getting any money. We were privy to our parents, if the money, worries, all of those things. But we were a very close-knit family community. So as you grew, you worked within the family, within their business, hopefully to take over in the future. And if you wanted to go somewhere and get a better education, still return, you could do that. I think you've had enough of me now. Can I just say that on the Town Moor, Newcastle Town Moor, because that's on there. That's the reason I was invited to speak. We have a school for the show children on Newcastle Town Moor. The first year we had 23 children attend with their distance learning. They're not out of school, they're bringing their distance learning. The second year we had 63. And by the third year, 80 odd. We still have that school going. It's part of Newcastle Town Moor, the tradition. And to see the children going to school in the morning with their mums or father, grandparents who have been up quite late, because the fair's been open late, they've gone to bed. I've even seen a mother drinking a cup of tea as she's walking along. Come on, I'm dying for this cup of tea. Off she'd go. It's such a joy for me to think that our children are doing so well at school, that they value education so much that while they're on the fairground, they're still learning. You've had enough of me now. Thank you very much for your kindness, your patience. But you know what? It's making you think. It makes you think about all of the things that we've heard today. Thank you so much for your time.